I use fluent English to communicate as my preferred method of communication, or let's say my most common, the way that I most commonly communicate with people is actually in English language. But yeah, I can also speak Mandarin, Chinese pretty reasonably well. I've lived in China for almost 3 years in total, and of course I'm an ethnic Dane, so I do speak Danish as well. I can't write it that well, and but I can get by. I can get by in Danish, and I can get by reasonably well in Mandarin Chinese. But one thing that's the same in the way of communication, it doesn't matter what language it is that we're all human beings, and we all have a very similar, we've got basically the same brain. We've got the same brain, or almost exactly the same kind of brain. It has two hemispheres, logical sort of reasoning part and a creative part. We've got our mind can draw on memory, or it can use creativity. Often we use the creative part of the brain when we lie. We need to I should say we use the creative part of our brain when we lie directly. But there are ways to, and when we lie directly, our brain needs to use more energy to come up with a fantastic lie. And when you're using more energy, you tend to sweat a little bit more. It comes up in the palms, and you have it because why? Because when you're using a little bit more energy to create a lie, you're going to burn a little bit. You're going to burn slightly more calories, so your heart has to slightly increase to supply more oxygen. You have to breathe a little bit more to supply more oxygen. So there's some basic things like that you can see using, for example, a polygraph machine. Things that happen on the outside that you can basically get some idea of how the person is feeling on the inside. So I'm talking about empathic qigong here. The empathic telepathy qigong. So this aspect of qigong, it does exist. I don't know what you would call it in Mandarin and Chinese, or which lineages would be most adept at this style of qigong. If you have any idea of any good qigong masters who are very adept at this type of thing, like telepathy, and who really just kind of emotionally, no matter who they're talking to, they're very emotionally grounded, and they're just observing, and they are suspending their judgment. And so instead of burning calories and stressing to use the creative part of the brain to try to talk to someone, they're just suspending their judgment. They're anchoring their instead of allowing the chi to go to the cognitive function and basically the electricity to start burning more calories, they allow the intellect to sink down into their dantian region. Or maybe they can sink it down further than that. Maybe they can sink it down to the Yongchuan point here. And then their mind, instead of using it in the creative part of the brain for language or in their frontal lobes to stress out their brain, they're just receiving the gravity and using that to align their body. That's where the mind intent is. And then when they're just observing, just receiving the information from the other person, and holding a cognitive suspension, and this way it's actually a much more direct type of communication. You're not burning calories to stress yourself out to try and use language. But let's say, because we have to articulate, we have to first, let's say we do accept some, we do have some awareness of our highest spiritual nature, that we did come from somewhere before we came here, and we are going somewhere else, you know, when we leave this place on earth, when we pass away, and that there's something else metaphysical going on. Then, you know, we have when we have an awareness of that, not just a belief, not a belief, but because again, a belief is basically again, is too much the creative part of the mind. If you believe something, you have to create some kind of idea or image or beautiful painting that you can say, oh, yeah, I believe in that, or some, you know, story about some intellectualized thing. And that's not what you want. You want to be able to have some kind of direct sense of that. And so you're using a higher brain function to do that. And so that's, yeah, I guess that's what you can say is like a Kundalini awakening, but it's not like you have one awakening and then boom, and then it all opens up, and then you can, oh, now I can feel directly, now I can download directly. Some people may have it like that, but I think for a lot of people it's a very gradual thing. Like first you just sort of realize, oh, there's another way of communicating with other people. I don't need to you know, stress myself to try and create something. When you just release that, and then you're just observing the other person, you're suspending your cognitive ability and just suspending your judgment, and then you are basically seeking to become aware of other more subtle exchanges, transactions. That's always happening, and that when you perceive those, it's actually a kind of direct form of telepathic communication. Yeah, so we have a receptivity, and that can really only happen once we have suspended our judgment, when we have suspended our cognition, at least say 60%. Probably you still have about 40% you know, cognitive activity, because you need some kind of, you need a little bit of intellectual processing to articulate some things, especially when you're going to speak. You have to be able to articulate it. Yeah. But when you're just being receptive of the other person, you don't articulate anything. For example, you may observe that someone feels a certain way, or you may hear a certain tone of their voice, or you may see a certain that they're sitting in a certain posture, you know, or you may get a certain vibe from them, and you don't necessarily articulate or intellectualize that vibe. You just feel that, and that's empathy. That's empathy, is when you actually just feel that. Or maybe not feel it, but you observe it. You're aware of how they're feeling. So when you don't involve any cognitive, you know, processing power, any judgment, then yeah, you're just aware of them, and that's what's giving rise to this telepathic, you know, ability. And yeah, of course, Qigong is going to help with that as well, because that's going to, when you start like aligning all the energy centers, and well, for a lot of people, you're going to need to do a lot of body work before you can. I mean, it's possible not to do any body work and just practice, you know, the awareness of the centers, and you know, or using other perhaps spiritual faculties, awareness, other faculties of the awareness in the mind as well to develop it. But a good balanced way that you can do it, that you I don't think you can go wrong. It's definitely Tai Chi and Qi Gong. A balanced Qigong, Tai Chi is generally a very balanced way, and Qigong can be a very balanced way as well. If it's a balanced Qigong, then that's good. So you just have to be careful with these kind of practices that you don't go too far into any extreme, because then you may become a little bit difficult to fit into society in that case. If you only want to try to if you feel let's say, one extreme would be to say feel prejudice against 普通的人. In Mandarin, that's like 不练的人, 普通的人. Maybe normal people or people who don't practice, people 不修道的人, people who don't necessarily engage in any mind-body discipline or cultivation, or who might not have any interest of that. But anyway, see, as soon as you create that category, you've already created a very fictional thing, because everyone has their own relationship with these things. Everyone has their own relationship to metaphysical experience. They might not necessarily talk about it in the same way as you or me. But everyone has their own experience, So, see, as soon as you start judging, as soon as you start creating some type of category, some kind of maybe stereotype, maybe that's a bit of not right the word, but you're creating some kind of you're using the creative part of your brain to categorize them. So that's not what you need to do. You need to you need cognitive suspension. You need to be receptive.